This was supposed to be the season in Baltimore after a 100-win campaign. They were supposed to be celebrating with Natty Boh and Blue Crab. Instead, they enter Tuesday's game facing elimination in the ALDS. Connor Newcomb from Locked On Orioles joins me now. And Connor, how did this team go from, hey, look, the O's to, oh, no?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because you look around baseball and it's not just happened to the O's right now. There's a lot of discourse about, is 5 days too much of a layoff? Does it actually hurt these better teams? Yeah. But really, when you think about it, does 2 games, really define a 100-win team? But also 2 games, anything can really happen to a team no matter how well you've played in the regular season. And for the Orioles, it hasn't been like one narrative. In game 1, they pitched extremely well and the bats never woke up and they lost 3-2. And then in game 2, they hit the cover off the ball and didn't get anybody out and lost 11-8. And so they're going to have to put 2 things together on each side to win a game here and just stay alive. But it does kind of feel like this team just, I don't want to say wasn't ready, but wasn't expecting what exactly a postseason baseball game looks like.
I wanted to ask you about that because at midseason, I don't think even the most optimistic Orioles fan thought, oh yeah, this team is going to win 101 games. Like that just did not seem like it was going to be in the cards. So how do you parse, hey, maybe the regular season, they outplayed expectations and maybe played a little bit over their head, or at least we thought it would be a year before they got to this place with, well, but they won 100 games. And so they should be playing better in the postseason. How do you balance those two right now?
It's so tough because, say they lose game 3, right? And they get swept out of the playoffs, and say they play an okay baseball game, they just lose. When you compare 162 games to 3 games, you should really take much more stock in 162 games, but that is not how sports work, especially in Major League Baseball, especially in the U.S. in general. You are graded by the postseason. And even if it's just 3 games and 3 somewhat close games where you did some good things, if you go out like that, especially if you get swept out like that, it is really, really tough to parse out the few things. And Orioles fans will always remember this season, no matter what, going from 110 wins to 2 years later, or 110 losses, I should say, 2 years later to 101 wins. But those memories are always going to be bookended by what happened in this postseason, because once you get that bye to the ALDS, you're only 3 wins away from being in the league championship series. And then you're with 3 other teams remaining. Anybody can win the World Series at that point. It's going to be very, very tough. It was a lot of good in the regular season, but I think what's going to happen now is people are going to pick apart the ways in which the Orioles did get lucky this year. They certainly did. Their real record was probably more like a 94-95 win team, but they ended up winning 101 games because there was luck on their side. That probably won them the division versus being the wild card team. Those things I think are going to get picked apart a little more than they were when we were just flying high in the regular season.
It does also raise questions, and there has been a lot of hashtag discourse about this, about baseball's the ultimate large sample size, right? 162 games. We're supposed to know who the best teams are. That's a lot of games to tell us. And yet in the postseason, we saw if the Orioles lose, we're going to already have multiple division winners go out. The Brewers didn't even make it past their opening series against the Diamondbacks. And so where do you come down on this idea of tweaks to the postseason so that maybe we reflect better the 162 games played in the regular season?
Yeah, I'm honestly, as a fan and a podcaster of a team that won 101 games and is now down 0-2 to a team that blew through the wild card series, I am not super mad about the playoff format right now. I get where people are coming from. Like the Braves look lost, and they were clearly the best team in baseball all season. I mean, bar none. I don't feel like anybody was really close to them for points this season, and they look lost against the Phillies. And so I get the point, right? Did those 5 days completely hurt them? This other team got to play. Where I see it is, I think it's a weird year where all 4 wild card series went only 2 games. Nobody went to a third game. Nobody had to use a third starting pitcher. Nobody had to dig into their bullpen for a game 3. And every single wild card team still got, 2 days off after that wild card series. So they really got a break too. So I think it's a weird year where in most years, you would think some of these series are going to go to 3 games and are going to give the team with a bye a much bigger advantage. I will say, though, I think it's becoming clear that the 1-game wildcard playoff, when it was just 5 playoff teams in each league, put the wild card teams at much more of a disadvantage because you would play that one game, you'd have one day off, and then boom, you were right into the DS. There is a lot more off days built in. It's an entertainment product. I get it, but I think that's where the one qualm would be.